In conversation with Karen Sacchetti, Karen Sacchetti is the author of Unconditional Love, a true love story. Karen is endorsed by the Marquis Who is Who as a leader in the field of education and health. Karen also received the Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. She pursued her education at both Penn State University and Lesley University in Cambridge, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in Creative Arts Education from the latter in 1998. After Karen received a certificate of completion in dance education training, she taught educational dance to children in the schools of Southern Rhode Island. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today Karen Sacchetti. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm quite excited, really. We're going to be having a conversation around your writing.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, Karen, I'd first love to say that I love the description page of your book titled Unconditional Love on Amazon. It was great to have a snippet into your experience with Peter and his younger brother, Mike. I would like to ask you, why do you decide to write this book? What inspired the making of it?
Yes, what inspired me to write this book was that I knew that I had a story within me
Hmm.
that needed to be shared with the world. And I had this dream to bring my love story to be published as a book. But you asked me what inspired me. First and foremost, I was inspired to write my story to honor God. For you see, my love story is a journey of faith
Hmm.
as I learned to trust and rely on God's strength to see me through a very dark period of my life. But my
Wow.
book not only details my struggles, but also shares my discovery of unconditional love, which is hence the title of my book. And I give an account of how I endured through this very dark time in my life and how
Hmm.
I overcame.
Wow. That sounds quite lovely to me, really. I love the sound of it. Quite lovely to have a snippet into how unconditional love came to be. And now I'd love to ask you, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes picking up unconditional love?
Yes. So my story, the themes in the book
Yeah.
are primarily centered around relationships. I would say the major theme of the book is love and loss, but there
Oh.
are also other themes. Yes, there are themes of betrayal and forgiveness,
Mm.
alcoholism and suicide, and resilience.
Wow.
I have been told that my book reads like a novel, but it is
Oh.
actually my real life story. My book is a memoir, and it is a love story with the initial allure of falling in love with Peter and the dream that goes with the initial marriage proposal. But yet it is also a tragic tale of how two brothers battled alcoholism, and
Wow.
they had such a fascinating childhood, and they had such distinct personalities, and they really had so much going for them. And
Mm.
so how my life intersected and crossed with these brothers. And so that I knew that I had a story to share.
Wow. Wow. I love the sound of this, really, and I love the tempo with which you answered it. Sounds like something that is quite emotional, quite lovely to me. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know if you experienced any challenges while writing the book. I know that writing memoir might pose some bit of challenges, but then I'd love to ask you if there's any challenges, could you tell us about it and how you ultimately overcame it?
Yes, I did have some initial challenges. As I said, my story it has a bittersweet undertone. It
Yeah.
has, as I said, the story of falling in love, which is so lovely and sweet, but it also has the painful times. And so there was a bit of resistance. I
Mm.
knew that I had my story that I wanted to share, but of course, having to bare my soul, so to speak, sharing my vulnerabilities in a book was quite new. And I had a bit of resistance within me to share this because This is not a story of fiction where you're making up characters. This is a real life
Real life
story.
story. Yeah. And now, Karen, apart from Unconditional Love, a true story, do you have another works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
I am not currently working on any other book. I may do a children's book. There is
Oh,
something that I wanted to do. It was actually published when I was in college, on a college level. It was not
wow.
published at the time on Amazon.
When do you have an idea that is going to be coming up?
I don't actually, because right now I am doing different interviews and I'm still promoting this book, Unconditional Love. And so I tend to be a person who works kind of in a methodical way where I focus very much on one
On
project.
one.
But
Okay.
I'm sorry, Peter, I can't give you a date of when I expect that to come out, but
Yeah.
I do, I do hope someday. But this book, this second book, will be much more lighthearted. It is actually a book for children to help with self-esteem. And but I did receive so much good feedback from my peers and my classmates that, and this was, a couple decades ago when I was still in
Wow.
college, and they said, you need to publish this story. And my college professor thought it was very well done, and I received, where I was published on a college level, he chose one of my stories over a 5-year period of
Wow.
stories. So it meant a lot to me, and I still want to come back and do that. So
Wow. That's lovely. That's amazing, really. I love the sound of that.
thank you.
Yeah. And now, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered ever since you got published?
Yes, there definitely are challenges. Some of the challenges include, okay, so for myself, I'm a first-time author. I've never
Yeah.
published a book before, and I went through the route of self-publishing.
Yeah.
I did not go through a traditional publisher. So for me, it was a whole learning curve
Process.
of how to promote the book. I've never done such a thing, and there's many challenges when you're an unknown author to promoting. But I just kept moving forward. I kept learning and taking courses, and I would recommend to anyone who is aspiring to be an author
Yeah.
that you could even start this process before your book is published. Like I pretty much learned some of these courses after, but they always say the best way is to actually start beginning and promoting your book even before it's published. That's a really good piece of advice I could share with your reader audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love your take on this, really. I love your take on this. Sounds quite amazing to me. And now, Karen, I'd like to ask you, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your book that we did not mention in this interview? I mean, about your memoir that we did not mention in this interview. I'd love the viewers to know.
Sure. I'd like to share a little bit about the message behind,
Mm,
because yes, there is the story, but there's also messages that go with the story. And my message really for why I wrote this book is to provide hope and healing and comfort
mm,
for those who are struggling with a loved one who maybe has an addiction or alcoholism, such as my fiance Mike had. My desire is to help others who may have loved ones struggling with mental health issues, of addiction, and suicide to know and understand that they're not alone, that they're not going through this alone, and that
yeah,
God's unconditional love is healing and it is transformative. This
yeah,
may be speaking to a mother who maybe has a teenage son who's battling addiction, or maybe to someone who has a spouse who is an alcoholic. We don't
mm,
have to struggle alone and try to solve it ourselves. But I also want to share that my transformation really came when I stopped trying to fix it all on my own, when I surrendered my situation to God, because I
wow,
realized this situation I was in is bigger than me.
mm,
So
wow. I love your take on that. And even the fact that you mentioned that when you surrender yourself to God, that sounds quite lovely to me, really. So thank you so much for sharing.
yes, absolutely.
I'd like you, Karen, to maybe prepare a page that you would love to read to the audience in your book. But before I do that, I'd also love to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
What I would advise as far as the writing process is to really just let yourself write without the editing. Many people, when they write, they have a perfectionistic where they want to stop and go back and fix the sentences and the punctuation and the tense of the verbs, past tense. But really, just let it flow. Let it flow. And before you even start writing, I highly recommend to start with an outline to really get your ideas. Like, what are your objectives with this book? Is it just the story to be entertaining? Or do you have, like, within my book, I have core messages that I wanted to share with the reader. And so if you can put those on a paper and outline those books, then it will just help you with your organization. But one
Yeah.
thing that truly helped me with my organization was that I wrote it in a chronological order. So
Oh.
my story began in 2010, and that's when I started it. And for me, because it is based on my real life story, writing it in that chronological order really helped me to unfold the events and it made it much easier writing it in that order.
Wow. That's great, really. That's very amazing. And I love your process and advice also for independent authors. And I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. Now, Karen, would you like to read a short section of your book to the audience? It could be a favorite page, a favorite line, paragraph, or even a page if you'd love to.
Okay. If you have the book with you, you're welcome to choose a page or something. I can share a little bit about the setting and the characters in the story, if that's okay.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Um, so the story takes place in 2010 in Boca Raton, Florida, where I receive an exciting marriage proposal from the charming and perceptive Peter. And after the initial allure of falling in love, moving 1,400 miles from Rhode Island to South Florida, I learned that Peter is not the prince that I was looking forward to getting married, that there's a much darker side to him. And so Peter abandons the marriage proposal in a deceptive manner, and I am left alone and disheartened. However, God's light shines through the mist of this darkness. And I know that God is a waymaker.
Yeah.
But then I receive an unexpected gift. For you see, out of this, while I'm alone and confused, and an unexpected friendship comes into my life through Peter's younger brother, Mike, where we just started as friends. And Mike would just check in on me every day to make sure I was okay. And it just grew organically. Yes, we stayed friends for the first 4 months. And then that unexpectedly blossomed into love, where we then had a dream of marriage. However, our dream for Mike and I gets placed on the back burner after we get word of Peter's suicide, which was in a very horrific, unusual manner. So unusual that the detective never even heard of investigated such a suicide in this manner. This then propels Mike into a deadly slope of alcoholism. He's sliding downward after the news of his brother's death. And so then I share my account, how I struggle with these obstacles of our love, keeping him alive, basically racing against the clock to keep Mike alive.
Wow. Wow, that's quite emotional, really. That's very
It is.
pulling. That's very, very pulling. And Mary, like I said in my introduction, Mary reading through the description page of the book on Amazon about the story of Peter and that of Mike, It's quite compelling. And I was like, oh, wow, this sounds like a book I'd love to pick up afterward. So thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about it. I'm quite excited, really.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And now, in case we have some viewers who are currently listening to this conversation and would love to get a copy of your book, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
Yes, so sure. So the book is available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes and Noble and different retailers who have online bookstores.
That's great. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Karen Shachetti's books directly on Amazon and also on other platform. So thank you so much, Karen, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation around your memoir.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.